Welcome to an RPG in a Box video tutorial. In this video, we're going to cover the topic of NPC followers. So this is going to be how to make a non-player character follow the player character around the map. Now this could be for multiple reasons. It could be you want to create an escort mission, so you need to lead a character somewhere. Or it could be that you want to create a set of, a party of followers. This could just be a random set of free NPCs or more that you want following you around the map, or it could actually be a visual representation of your actual party. Refer to the party video to understand how to set up a party. Let's start very simply with how do you make an NPC follow you, and then we'll get more and more advanced as we go on. We'll talk about some of the things you need to know about NPCs who follow you, things to be watchful for, things you need to be mindful of, how to get around certain issues, all those sort of things we'll cover as we go through this video, okay? But let's start very simply. How do we get, for example, Justin to follow us? The way to get an NPC to follow you is to set it in their behavior, okay? Now, if you want to know a bit more about behaviors, refer to my behaviors basics video. But what we're going to do is we're going to go into the game. No, we're not. We'll do it on, we place Justin down on the map. To quickly get him to follow us, we're going to select Justin, and we're going to go down in his behavior settings to where it says player interest, and we're just going to say seek out player, and then we can set a range that he'll follow us as long as we're within that range. So let's set it quite high. Let's set it to 20, okay? And let's give him a fixed movement rate of every second, or maybe even 0.1. And if we say quick play, one thing I did forget to change, forgive me, is he's still immobile. Okay, and as soon as we start, he's walking over to us, and if I move, he's going to move with me. So I've essentially created a follower, okay? So that's as simple as it is to create a scenario where someone's following you. And then if you want them to stop following you, you would change their behavior. You'd either change their behavior completely, or you would just change that one option, movement area, for example, change it to none. Okay? So that's very basic, how to get an NPC to follow you. Let's embellish this with a practical example, and let's talk about some of the things you need to be mindful of when creating NPCs who follow you around. So I created, I'm going to put Justin back to none and none. So he's just going to stand there, okay? And I'm going to create a scenario because I've got another map over here where I've placed Sarah, okay? I've put her in the sort of forest. We're going to create a scenario where she's lost. Let's say she's lost in this forest. And when we approach Sarah, she's going to have a bit of dialogue asking us to help her lead her out of the woods. And then if we choose to accept that, it's not going to be a choice in this case, but if it was, if you're actually creating a game, you'd have a dialogue choice. But once the dialogue is over, she's then going to be following us, okay? And we're going to use the sort of things we've gone over so far to get her to follow us, but we're going to do it in a script, okay? And then the idea being that we're then going to lead Sarah out of this map, and we're going to take her to between Stumpy and Justin, and that will be the goal, okay? So this tile here is the destination, okay? So let's set that up. So first thing we need is a dialogue for this. So I'm just going to create one called dialogue 2. It's going to start with an NPC narrator. This is Sarah saying, help, I'm lost. I've been in this forest all day. Can you help me find the way out? A player would typically choose, but in this case, I have no choice. And then she responds with that. And then we'll have our action. Okay, so at the end of this dialogue, we want Sarah to start following the player. Okay, now we're not ready for that yet. We're not ready for the scripting side of it. I just wanted to get the dialogue created. So I'll save that, and let's go back to the map that Sarah's in. So Sarah currently has this ID when we select her of Sarah1. I'm going to Entity Properties, scroll up the top. She's got this entity ID Sarah1, and she starts on the map with some with a single setting that I've changed, which is the fact that she is immobile. So she's just going to stand there the whole time. Okay. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to create a behavior, because I think it's just quicker to do this via a preset rather than changing the individual behavior options right now. So we'll create a new preset and we'll just call it Sarah Follow. And we're going to change a few things. So first of all, movement area should be all. I'm going to set a fixed interval length of 0.1, maybe 0.2, just to slow it down just a tad. And then this is the most important one, obviously, the player interest, seek out player, and we'll leave that at 6. We should never go out of that range, because we're going to be right next to her when we initiate this behavior, because we'll be talking to her at the time. And also because she's got such a fast movement interval, she's pretty much going to be keeping up with us everywhere we go. So it's almost going to be impossible for Sarah to step out of that range. But just in case something happens where she does, as long as we have a range, then as long as we're within it, then she'll continue to find us. Okay, so now we need to set up the fact that we currently can't get into this map. So let's select this tile and go to map 2 and select that tile. Right click and we will link the two maps together. So now we've got a way of going from this map to this map and vice versa. Let's save both maps. And we'll leave it at that for a moment, because let's just see this works. Oh, we also need to select Sarah, and in her default behavior that she has on the map, when we interact with her, she should start dialogue and set it to dialogue 2 so that we can trigger that dialogue. Now, what we haven't done, we need to now go back and amend our script. So amend our dialogue to have the script. So what we're going to do is we're going to click the script node and it will bring up the script builder. We're going to take that out and we're going to type self. And the reason we're typing self is because self is a reference to the NPC who, in this case, is the one we're talking to. Okay. Self is, a variable name that can be used that's dynamic for whoever you're interacting with, talking to, whatever at the time. So self in this case will be Sarah. So we can use it as a shorthand. So Sarah dot behavior equals, and then Sarah follow. So that will change her behavior now so that she follows us at an interval rate of 0.1 or 0.2. Okay. Let's go into game and see if this works. So here we are in map 1. I transition to map 2. There's Sarah. I can talk to her. She's currently not doing anything. She's just standing in the spot. So let's click on Sarah. Help, I'm lost. I've been in this forest all day. Can you help me find the way out? I've no choice but to say yes. Thank you so much. And now, as soon as we click, it should change her behavior to the one where she's going to follow us. Okay? And so effectively now, Sarah is accompanying us. Okay? Now, one thing you need to be mindful of, okay, as I walk around for a moment, is Sarah can block us, okay? Notice how if I go up onto the path, now Sarah is standing in my way, okay? I want to go that way so I can take her back to the other map, but she's now blocking my path. We'll address that later when we get to the topic of party members, because that issue is going to be further exacerbated when you have more than just one NPC following you. So we'll talk a bit more about that later on. But for now, I'm just going to see if I can maneuver myself onto the path in such a way she's not in my way. There we go. Okay, so all's working well so far. We've gone up to Sarah. We've said, we'll help you, and she's now following us. So presumably, if we go to map 1, where's Sarah gone? Let's go back. There she is, and she's following us. But every time we go back to map 1, she doesn't join us. Okay, and that's the simple fact, as you can probably tell. But it is what it is. NPCs do not traverse between maps. Okay, it's impossible to get this particular Sarah to leave this map and go with us into the other map. That's impossible. Okay, now that's not to say you can't create a game where you can accompany an NPC to a different map, but you just have to understand that it's impossible to get this specific particular NPC to do that. Okay, we can fake it, we can create the illusion of it, but it's not going to be this specific Sarah. So now that I've set up this scenario where we want to do this, but we can't currently achieve it, now let me demonstrate how you would actually go about doing this. So going back to the map, we've got this scenario where we talk to Sarah and she starts to follow us. Okay, but we want to now lead Sarah out of this map. And also, once we've got Sarah into this map, we also then want to, complete the objective somehow, right? So we're also going to do that as well. But first, let's solve the problem. How do we get Sarah to seemingly follow us out of this map and into the other map? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a global property first. So we're going to go to the game configuration panel, go to global properties, and we're going to create a new Boolean property. So change that to Boolean and click add. We're going to call this is following. You can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it is following, and it's going to start false. And this global property is going to track whether Sarah is or currently isn't following us. Okay, so at the beginning she's not, so it's false. This will allow us to track the state of Sarah. Okay, is she or is she not following us? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this tile where we leave this map and load into the other map, and I'm going to edit. So I'm going to right click on it, go to scripting, go to edit quick script, and I'm going to edit the script that was created by the level transition option to further add some more to this. So before we load map, we want to check that global property. So if global property is following equal true, then. So if she is following us, then what we want to do just before we leave this map and load the overworld map, we want to remove entity Sarah1. You have to specify Sarah this time because self would not be Sarah in this occasion. It would be the tile with the script, which we don't want. Okay, so remove entity Sarah1, validate, and okay. What that now means is that if we've spoken to Sarah and she's following us, when we step on this tile, just before it takes us to map 2, or map 1 even, overworld, it's going to remove this Sarah from this map. Why do we want to do that? We want to do that because if we come back into this map, we want to be able to obviously, well, I'm going to be jumping the gun. So there's a reason why we're removing Sarah, and I'll explain it when it comes up again. But because it's an if statement, not a guaranteed, it means that if she's not following us, so if we didn't speak to her, if we leave the map, it's not going to remove her. So that way, when we come back, she'll still be there, so we can talk to her at a later point. So if you walked into this map, saw her there but didn't do anything, then left the map and then came back again, she'd still be standing there, so that you can talk to her. It's only going to remove her if you've already spoken to her. Okay. Now, in order for that to work, we need to go to the dialogue, and just after we change her behavior, we need to change the global property. Is following should be set to true. Okay, great. So that's now created a situation where when we talk to Sarah, when we leave this map, if she's following us, it will remove Sarah from this map. Okay, but what we haven't solved is when we arrive at this map, Sarah's not here. So we need to fix that now. So what we're going to do is for that, we need to create a script in the script editor. So we're going to click on the script editor. We're going to create a new script, and we'll just call this place Sarah. And we'll use the visual script editor for this. We're going to delete the display message, and we're going to place in a evaluation condition that's going to be set to if global property equals Boolean. We need to change the property name, is following. So are we following, is Sarah following us? Is this global property true? If it is, then we want to add character Sarah. For the tile ID, we're going to type player dot left tile, and for the entity ID, Sarah1. Okay, that doesn't go into the end node, it goes into the disconnect. That comes out of the top one. Okay, so if, let's go into code view now. If global property is following is true, then add character Sarah. This shouldn't be a string, so be mindful of that. That's part of the issue with using the visual nodes, is it doesn't always do these things properly. So let's delete the quotes. If global property is following is true, then add character Sarah to the player's left tile with the ID Sarah1. Okay. Now, a few things to talk about here. Add character. The first parameter is the model name. So in this case, Sarah. Okay, it's using the name of the character model that you have in your asset browser. Okay, so that's the first bit you fill in. This bit is where is it going to place this particular character that's being told to spawn in or be added. Now, in my case, I know that there's lots of room around the player that I can say player left tile. Okay, I'm also only spawning in a single NPC, so I know that the left tile is going to be vacant and I don't have to worry about it afterwards either. If I was spawning multiple characters, I can't just tell them all to spawn on the left tile, because the first person that does will then stop all the others from being able to spawn. So this particular option here of add character can get quite complicated if you've got more than one character you're trying to place. And we'll talk a bit more about this when we talk about party members, because we're going to have to address this issue as part of that. But right now, it's very easy for me to just say player left tile, because I know that the left tile is going to be available as I move back and forth. Okay. What you would probably want to do to be super safe is first of all check if player dot left tile is not null. Okay, I don't need to do that because I know it's not going to be null. But obviously, if there could be maps that you transition to where there isn't a left tile from where you spawn in, then obviously you need to check that before you then tell the character to be added to that tile, because obviously if they can't be added there, you still won't see Sarah, and that's obviously going to create problems for the follower system you're trying to create. In our case though, as I say, I know there's a left tile, so I'm just for speed, I'm going to use it. And then this is the ID of the new Sarah that we place, and I'm using the same ID that I've used on the one that I've placed in this map. That basically means that it's going to almost act like it's the same Sarah, because it's going to have the same reference ID, even though it's not, because in between this Sarah and the one that we reference in this script, that one will be removed. So it's not actually going to be the same Sarah, but it's going to be like a clone that we create after the fact. But because it's got the same ID, all our other scripts, like for example, this one, this will still apply because we will have an entity called Sarah1, which we can keep deleting as we leave this map. Okay, this will make more sense when we put it all together and test it. Okay, so we're giving Sarah the same ID as the one that we placed ourselves in when we designed the map. Okay, and then the last thing we need to do is reference the same entity again by the ID, and we need to reapply the behavior because this is a new NPC that won't have that behavior unless you specify it. So not only do we want to add a new Sarah in, but this Sarah should also start following us because this is supposed to be the Sarah that's followed us into a different map. Okay, so apply and save that. It's a very simple script really. But now what we need to do is put this script on every single map. Okay, so on this map with nothing selected, go down to where it says, to where it says preload script, set that to place Sarah, save it. Go to our overworld map, this is the important one, preload script, set it to place Sarah. So now that means whichever map we go into, it's going to add Sarah, okay? Now this is why we're removing Sarah from this map when she's following us, because when we come back into this map, if we didn't remove Sarah, it's going to spawn one, and so we'll have two Sarahs, okay? So we want to make it so that while Sarah is following us, she's always being despawned from the map we're leaving, so that when we come back to this map, if we do, we can then, she'll start by being gone, but when we add her back in to follow us, it will be the only Sarah that's then on this map, okay? So that's why we're removing, that's why you kind of need this two-stage process. You despawn them when you leave and you spawn them when you arrive, okay? And you do that for all maps, which means we need to do that for this map. We need to edit this script and add the same check. If global.property Sarah follow, or is following, sorry, is equal to true, then remove entity, entity Sarah1. Apply. Okay, so we'll test that in a second, but that should now create a scenario where we can hopefully walk back and forth between maps and Sarah will seemingly be following us all the way. But just understand, it's going to be a different Sarah in between maps, okay? But because she's got the same ID and looks the same, for all intents and purposes, it's going to be Sarah following us between maps, okay? Now let's create the goal, okay, which is going to be this tile here. So I'm going to right-click on this tile and add a quick script. We'll leave the display message, we'll have her say something, but what we want to say is if initiator, now initiator is like self, it's a shorthand, it's a dynamic reference that changes depending on who initiator is at the time. Initiator is basically who triggers this script. So rather than what itself would be the tile, because we're putting this script on the tile, initiator is who's stepped on the tile, so who's activated this script. So in this case, if initiator is entity Sarah1, and again, that's why we're giving her the same ID when we add her in, is so that this script will find her. Okay? If initiator is equal to Sarah1, then what we're going to do is we're going to change, that can go inside. We're going to change the behavior of Sarah. Now we could create a new preset, or we can just change the specific settings in her behavior that really matter. So all we really need to change is her move area. So we'll say initiator dot behavior move area equals none, and that will essentially stop her following us. Okay, so as soon as she steps on that tile, if it's her, then set the move area to none. What we can also say is initiator dot direction equals might be north. Let's try north. And then we'll have display message and God, I'm out of those woods. And then we'll make sure that it's Sarah that says it by adding initiator as the speaker. Okay. So, oh, and then what we should also add is global dot property is following should be false, because she's now not following us because we've achieved our objective. Okay, let's just say that. Just going to double check things before I run them. Yep. Okay, so let's go into game and see what effect this has. Oh, no, we can't go to game yet. There's a couple more settings we need to set. First of all, this tile needs to have this option turned on because we want Sarah to trigger it, not us. So we want Sarah to stand on this tile and do something. So in this case, trigger this. So we need to make sure that's triggerable by NPCs is on so it can detect when an NPC has stepped on it. But what we also need to do is go to her behavior that she's going to have when she's following us. So settings, behaviors, Sarah follow. This is the behavior she's going to have while she's following us around. So while she's following us around, we want her to be able to trigger scripts. We'll turn that on as well. So both of those settings need to be on in order for this tile to do anything when she steps on it. Okay. So here we are in game. So if we go to map 2 with the forest, we can see Sarah there. If we leave without talking to her, she should not be removed. So if we go back, she should still be standing exactly where she was before. Now let's go talk to her. She'll ask us for help because she's been stuck in the forest all day. We'll say we can help. And she thanks us. And now she's following us. Okay. And it's set that global property is following to true. So now when we step on this tile, it should both despawn her from this map. But then when we arrive in map 2, that should trigger the preload script. And because global property for Sarah following us is true there as well, it will add Sarah in and set her to follow us. So now we have created a scenario where Sarah has seemingly left one map with us and gone back. And if we take Sarah back into map 2, again, it removes her from map 1 as we leave and adds her back to this map as we arrive. Okay, so she can literally follow us now wherever we go. But it's important to understand you have to put the place Sarah script on every map. Because if I created a third map that, let's say, was past this path here, and we transitioned to it, but we didn't put the place Sarah script on that map, then Sarah would be stuck here. And also, if we removed her, we would now not have a Sarah here. So we'd have completely lost Sarah. So just understand this system, if you're going to use it, you need to make sure that every map has the ability, every map that you can reach at that point in time needs to have the script on it where you are adding in followers if they're following you at that point between those maps. Okay. Otherwise you'll have instances where you'll walk to a map and they're not there. Okay. But now if we leave back to this map, let's get Sarah to stand on this tile. Okay. Thank God I'm out of those woods. It's turned her to face this direction, but it also should have stopped her following us. So if we click off and we move, she's now just standing there. Okay. And now also, because we changed the global property, it's not going to remove her when we leave and go back. Which means when we go back, she should still be standing in between Justin and Stumpy, exactly where we left her. So we've now created, in essence, a perfect escort scenario where we've been able to go into a separate map, take an NPC from that map, successfully escort them from one map to the other, and then end the mission, end the process. Okay, but just understand that this is still a different Sarah to the one that was actually placed in the woods, but because she looks the same, has the same ID, and if it's the same model with the same properties and things that you'd set up in the voxel editor, to all intents and purposes, it is the same. It's just not the exact same one that you placed on the map, because that's physically impossible to do with RPG in a box. Okay, with that all said, now let's go over how to create party members, or how to get party members to follow you, because there's a few things you need to understand about that. It adds a bit of complexity to it, so I want to talk about that, because obviously at this point now you know how to make followers, so you could probably extrapolate everything I've covered in this video and sort of almost do it for yourself, and you absolutely could. But let me do it first on video to explain some things that you need to be mindful of, and also my approach to going about doing it, just so that you have somewhere to springboard off of. Okay, so I'm going to remove the script from this tile, because we're not going to use the escort stuff anymore. So I'm going to revert this back to just a map transition for now. Same with this map. And I'm going to delete this Sarah. And I'm going to put Sarah on here. And I'm going to set her default behavior to movement area none. And her ID, Sarah 1. Okay, so we got Sarah 1, we got Justin 1, and we got Stumpy 1. Okay, so we have a way of referencing them, although to be honest, we're actually not going to use their IDs, we're going to use self anyway, but nonetheless, we could reference them if we needed to. So for this, what we're going to do is I'm going to put a dialogue on all three of them that's the same dialogue, and we created that already in the party members video, but I'll just show it off. It's this dialogue file here where you say, want to join my party, and whoever we're speaking to says, sounds fun, and then they should join our party. Okay, so what we're going to do is add a script node underneath that adds them to our party. Okay, so the first thing we need to solve is that the add party member command requires the character model to go here. So in other words, these file names here. Okay, now we want this dialogue to be placed on all three of them. Rather than making one dialogue file per party member, I want to make a single dialogue file that can be placed on all three of them, and it will add the relevant character, whoever I'm speaking to at the time. I wanted to add them to my party. So in other words, I can't put a specific character name, a file name in here, because then it would just add 3 instances of that character. For example, if I put Stumpy into here, then if I spoke to Justin, it's going to add Stumpy. If I then spoke to Sarah, it's going to add Stumpy. So I'm just going to end up with multiple Stumpies. So what I want to do is I want this to be dynamic so that it will add who I'm speaking to at the moment. So if I'm speaking to Justin, it adds Justin. If I'm speaking to Sarah, it adds Sarah. In order to do that, I need access to a model name that's going to vary. Okay, so what I'm going to do at the very top above this is I'm going to create a local variable, which I'm going to call incrementer or inc, and it's actually going to equal global dot property. Now I haven't created this property yet, so I will create it in just a moment, which I'm also going to call incrementer. So I'm just going to set a local variable to a global property. Okay, I'll explain why I'm doing that in a moment, but let's just continue on. I'm also going to create a local variable called model name, and it's going to equal self.model. And that's how you grab the file name, this bit here that we need for add party member. That's how you grab it for the person you're speaking to at the moment, because self will change depending on who you're speaking to, and therefore we can get the dot model of the person who's relevant at the time. So we can then pass into the add party member command the variable name, and that will add that person to our party. However, we need to give them a unique member ID, and it needs to be unique. We can't just like with the model name, you can't keep adding party member 1, for example, 3 times in a row to our party, because in this case, it's not going to allow it because it has to be unique. So for this, I'm going to use the name PM for party member, but then I'm going to open and I'm going to press $, open and close curly brackets. And within the curly brackets, I'm going to type $inc. And I'm going to use that local variable that we created at the top. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm storing a global property in there is well, there's 2 things to note. First of all, this needs to actually be a global property because we want to keep this number incrementing outside of this dialog. Okay. Because if we use a local variable, it's going to be reset every time we speak to a different person. So if we speak to Justin, it's going to currently be 0. So it will add him as PM0. But once we've done that and we go speak to Sarah, it's going to start at 0 again. So we're going to try and add Sarah as PM0. So it needs to be a global property so that it can stay as it currently is as we go through talking to people in memory, always going up. Okay. However, I don't want to use global property down here. While you can, it's putting a global property into what's called a placeholder expression is just a lot more complicated because of how it's laid out. So that's why I'm putting it into a local variable, because then I can just really simply put what's in there essentially into there without so much of a headache. Okay. Just trust me, it's just easier to put it into a local variable first before you put it into a placeholder expression. Okay. Next, what I want to do is change the behavior of the person who I'm speaking to. And we need to set up a behavior for this because we haven't done it yet, which I'm going to call follow. Okay. We've created one at the moment called Sarah follow, which is a bit too specific. So I'm going to go and create a new behavior in a minute. I'm just putting the script in place first. We then want to add to a group, and we want to add self, the person we're speaking to a group which I'm going to call followers. Okay. And then the last thing you want to do is increment that global property that we're going to be creating in a minute to go up by 1. Okay. So that means the next person we speak to, it will have gone up in a number. So this will essentially add party member PM1 the first time, PM2 the second time, PM3 the third time. Okay, and it will keep going up no matter how many party members you add. So it's an automated incrementing system. So the last thing we need to do is go to global properties, and we don't need this one anymore. We're going to create a number property, which we're also going to call increment, like that. And it's going to start 1. So that the first party member goes in as PM1, and then it's going to increment it to 2, etc., etc. Okay, and that's that dialogue done. So now what that means is that we can put this dialogue on all 3 NPCs in their properties. So in their current behavior, when we interact with them, start dialogue, dialogue, start dialogue, dialogue, start dialogue, dialogue. So they're all going to say the same thing, and they're all going to have the same effect, which is once we've spoken to them, that person is going to be added to our party, but the model is also going to follow us. Okay, the character that's on the map is going to follow us. Now let me set up the behavior, because I want to change this and call it something else. Okay, and it's player interest, seek out player, movement area all, movement interval. Let's leave it for the moment at fixed 0.1, just so we can see that it works. But obviously, remember, this is not ideal, and we'll go over this in a moment. Okay, but we should now have created a system where we can essentially talk to all 3 of these characters, both add them to our party, but also have them following us around the map like they are our party. So let's test this out. Let's start by talking to Justin. Doesn't matter which order you do them, but we'll go from left to right. So wants to join my party. He says, sounds fun. So hopefully he's now following us, but also added to our party codex. Again, refer to my party members video if you hadn't seen that yet, if you need to know a bit more about how party members actually work. Let's click Sarah. Same dialogue, but now it's Sarah saying it. So Sarah will be added to our party and will now follow us. Let's talk to Stumpy. want to join my party. Stumpy says sounds fun. And so now I've got 3 people following me. And if I print the party codex, the built-in reference to who's in the party, we can see that it has added, aside from us, it's added PM1, which is Justin, PM2, which is Sarah, and PM3, which is Stumpy. So it's added them in the order that I talked to them in, and you can see that the incrementer worked. It went up from 1 to 2 to 3 as it added them into my party member, as it added them as party members. Okay. So we now essentially have party members that are Justin, Sarah, and Stumpy, and I also have NPCs who are following me. Okay. Now, like I mentioned in the party members video, I will quickly reiterate it here. These are not your actual party members. Okay, they are 2 fundamentally different processes. The party members that you see listed here, these are not the ones on the map, and these ones on the map that are following you are not the ones in your party codex. They are 2 completely separate characters. Okay, so what that means, for example, is if I show inventory or equipment, let's say, party.member, Sarah is PM2. So PM2, show me Sarah's equipment. Okay, so let's give her a sword. Oops. Give item 0001 1 party.member PM2. So I've given Sarah a sword. Let's view her inventory again. Okay, so there's Sarah's inventory, okay, and her equipment panel, okay. Now this is my party members equipment panel, right, because I'm showing equipment for party member PM2. So I'm now trying to equip my party member Sarah with a sword. So if I click the sword from her inventory and put it into my right hand, okay, it's essentially equipped Sarah with the sword, okay. But if I close her inventory, she's not carrying the sword. Well, the reason for that is this isn't the Sarah you've equipped. You've equipped the one that's currently off screen in the party member codex. You'll only see Sarah carrying the sword in that case when you're on a tactical turn-based or a menu-based battle, when you're actually then seeing this party member. When it places that specific character with that specific inventory and that specific equipment in a tactical turn-based battle, that's when you'll see those changes take effect. Okay? So when you're in an overworld map like this one, where your NPCs are just following you around to be visual representations of your party, if you want a sword like this to also appear in the hands of a completely separate NPC, because remember this is a separate Sarah, you're going to have to put an on-equip script and an on-unequip script on your sword, for example, that says when you've equipped it, you should also attach it to entity Sarah 1, the one that's on the map. So in other words, as soon as you equip your party member, it also duplicates and equips visually on the NPC that's following you around, if that makes sense. So in other words, you're not equipping this Sarah, you're just attaching the sword, okay? Now, another thing you need to be mindful of is obviously as you walk between maps, because you know these party members as they are at the moment, they're not going to follow us between maps. Remember the issue we had with Sarah when we were doing the escort mission? These NPCs are going to stay in this map unless we tell them to be removed and added as we move between maps, which we'll do in a second. I'll show you how to do it with multiple NPCs. But because we're going to be removing and adding these NPCs as we move around, it's also going to undo any of the stuff that you do. So for example, if I try and show it again, if I equip Sarah with this sword and on equip it attaches a sword to this Sarah, but then we move to a different map, it's going to remove Sarah, add her back, and she's not going to have the sword because the Sarah that your sword was scripted to update was removed. So you also then need to have checks as you move between maps to re-add the equipment back. So it's a little bit, as you can start to imagine, the whole thing starts to spiral outward. You need to start thinking about keeping track of lots of different things just to get these party members to follow you. Because remember, these aren't party members. So you're having to sort of treat them as completely separate systems. Now, the other issue that we've got immediately is because they're all moving at the same time and they move as soon as I move, they're blocking me in. Okay, they've boxed me into a position now where I'm completely stuck. I can't go any further because there's a gap in the map. I can't go to the left because there's Justin. Can't go to the right because there's Sarah. And I can't go back because there's Stumpy. Now, it's worth pointing out that this issue only applies in grid movement maps. If this was a free movement map, that's not a problem. Let me just quickly show you. So now if I put myself in that same position where I'm standing here and they all box me in, because it's free movement, I'm not actually stuck. You see, I can move in smaller increments, which means I can also move diagonally as well. But it means I can squeeze in between Sarah and Justin like that. So I can always move around them. So free movement, this is not an issue. But grid, you're going to find yourself, if you're not careful, with situations where they're boxing you in. And the reason for that is in grid, you obviously have to move, very linearly, always to the center of the tile. And grid movement is always checking that you can get from one tile to another before you move. And if it sees a character in the way, it's going to say, well, you can't go there, so you can't go there. Simple as that. So how do you get around it if you are using a grid movement again, or map at the time? Well, the best thing to do is to adjust your following behavior, okay? Because this is just too fast an interval rate for characters who are going to block your movement. What I would suggest you do is, instead of using fixed, use random range, because that then means that every single one of your party members are going to move at different points, which creates gaps, okay, that you can squeeze between. But also make sure the interval is at least 1. And, 1.2 or something like that. 1's fine. But, by having a sort of a gap of a few seconds in between, just means that what you'll have situations where Sarah might move, but Stumpy doesn't immediately. So if you need to squeeze between them, that gives you an opportunity to do so. So let's test this out one more time. Okay, so now all 3 of them are following me. But you see, if I stand still, they will eventually get into position. But as long as I don't stand still, I can actually maneuver myself around. So I can make sure, whoops, I didn't mean to level transition there. But you can see that, it gives me just enough time to move out of getting boxed in. Obviously, if you stay still long enough, they will get into a position where, for example, if I stand here, they will form around me, which is what they want to do. So Justin should eventually move to here. And then stop. Because obviously the whole point of seek player is they want to stand next to you. So Sarah is, Stumpy is, and Justin is, okay? Now, if they were set to follow me at a fixed interval of 0.1, it means as soon as I move down here, they're all going to move. Justin's going to move, Sarah's going to move, Stumpy's going to move, which keeps me boxed in. But if I set it to random range, and at a longer range of a minimum of 1 second, then it means I've got time to move, and they move at different rates. So if I need, for example, I'm going to try and squeeze around Justin. Okay, they're sort of boxing me in, but I can get around them, right? There's a way, because it's just forgiving enough that I can sort of work around them. But you just need to be mindful that if you've got multiple people following you, because they're not passable, and you don't want to set them to passable, that's not the solution, by the way, because if you set them to passable, they'll all end up standing on the same tile, because they'll all think they can stand on this tile, for example. And so you'll end up with Justin, Stumpy, and Sarah all standing on one tile, which obviously is silly. So don't change the passable setting, but obviously because they're impassable, you need to be mindful of, how quickly they're moving so they're not boxing you in, okay? So the last thing I want to talk about in this video is the obvious question. Okay, so you've got party members following you, but we now need to solve the problem of following you between maps. And there's also something you need to be aware of as well with that. I'm just going to quickly create a duplicate of, let's say, this map. Let me just duplicate it. And we'll call it map 3. Very imaginative name, I know. But I'm actually going to set map 3 as a battle map, okay, to demonstrate something you need to be aware of, okay? So let's now set up our party members. I say party members, they're not, but our followers, who are our party, to follow us between maps. So we've already done some of that in the dialogue. That's why I was doing add to group and things like that. So what we've essentially done is we've got a part, when we speak to all 3 of these characters, they get added to our party, but they also start following us, but also we're adding the ones that are following us to a group called followers, okay? Now that group is going to be important. It's a big part of how we're going to set this system up, okay? There's another part to this system as well. Remember how when I talked about add character with Sarah, that the middle parameter, let me see if I can, is add character. The middle parameter here, the tile, okay, this, this needs like a coordinate, okay? Now, there are lots of complicated ways of checking for coordinates and mathematically increasing coordinates and such, etc., like y plus 2 or x minus 1, that sort of thing. You can absolutely do all of that. But I'm going to show you in this video just a really quick, simple way to do it, especially if you know how your maps are going to be laid out. Then it makes sense to just do it this way because it takes all of the faff out of trying to calculate free vacant tiles and all of that, okay? So what you need to know, first of all, is how many party members in total are you going to have possible that could be entering this map with you, okay? Now, in my case, I've only designed it for free, but, if the maximum amount of NPCs you're going to have following you is 10, then you're going to need 10 tiles, okay? So you always need the maximum, okay? So even if I've only got 3 following me at the time, that doesn't matter because it will just use 3 out of the 10 tiles. What you don't want to have is a situation where you've got 10 NPCs following you, but you've only designed it for free, right? So always design it for the bigger number, okay? In my case, it doesn't matter because I'm only ever going to design it for free because it's a tutorial. So what I'm basically getting at is we're going to create a group that's going to accommodate our party members. Okay. Now, I currently spawn into this map on this tile because this is set up from the map transition, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the tile above it, shift and click the tile below it. So the tiles in between, or tiles around, sorry. And then because I've got 3 NPCs, I can click any other tile I want. Okay, I could click that one, or I could click that one. It really doesn't matter. It's up to you to design your spawn group as however you want it to look. Let's do something like that. So I'm now going to press the G key, and I'm going to create a group out of those tiles called entry area. Or entry, I'll call it entry zone just so, because that's the name I've been using in my mind. So if I don't change it, I won't make mistakes. But you can call it whatever you want, okay? Now you need to do that for all maps where you're going to be entering with your party. So let's do that one as well. Entry zone. And you want to name them the same because we're going to be using the same script on all the maps, okay? So for efficiency, call every group the same name in all of the maps, okay? So every map has an entry zone group, which in my case consists of 3 tiles, okay? So now we're going to put all of this together. So the first thing we need to do is we need to, like we did with Sarah, we need to remove these party members from this map when we leave, okay? So for that, we're going to edit the quick script. So before we load map, what we're going to do is we're going to for loop through our party codex. So for party, I won't call it that, for party member in party do, no, sorry, we're not looping through the party, we're looping through the group, okay? So for party member in group followers do end remove entity $PM. So what's group followers? Let me remind you, that's what we have in our dialogue. Whenever we speak to an NPC, as well as setting that NPC to follow us, we're also adding that NPC to a followers group, okay? That means that once we've finished talking to all these 3 NPCs that have this dialogue, all 3 of these characters are going to be following us, but they're also going to be in a group called followers. So this tile is going to loop through that group and remove everyone in that group. So that's going to remove automatically all, however many people you've got following us. So that means if we only spoke to Sarah and Stumpy, then it's only going to remove Sarah and Stumpy because Justin wouldn't be in the group. So he'd still be standing there, which is fine. So it solves all that for us. Okay, groups are fantastic for that. Okay, and we obviously want to do the same in this map. So let's just quickly put the set. In fact, let's reuse the code. Let's edit this script. Grab that. And paste that in there. So now both maps, as we come and go, it's going to be removing whoever's in our group following us. Okay, but now we need to set up the actual important adding scenario. Okay, so for that, we're going to go to the script editor again, and we're going to do a variation of this place Sarah script. We'll create a new one called place party. And again, this script should be able to be used on every map. You shouldn't have to create a unique script for every single map. We want this one script to go on all maps. So, grab my notes for this. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to first of all create a local variable, which is an incrementer, which is going to be used for looping through the tiles. So we'll get to that in a minute. So that starts at 0. And then we're going to loop through our party codex. Because remember, at this point in time, when we load into a map, there are no NPCs on the map. So how do we know who to add? Well, we know who to add because they exist in the party codex, because they are sort of invisible party, right? And we want to make them visible. So this is how we're going to grab who's in our party and put versions of them, because remember, they're not actually them, but put versions of them on the map. So we're going to loop through the party, and we're first of all going to check if the current party member that we're on at the moment as we loop through is not the player, because we don't want to add the player character down, because then you'd have duplicate player characters, which, you know, we don't want. So as long as it's not the player, then every other person who's in our party, we want to do the following. We want to obviously create a version of them. Now, add character requires the model name. So what we need to actually grab is the file name, this file name from the model browser, for all of the party members. So that's a bit tricky to do. So what we're going to do is we need to reference, first of all, the party member. And to do that, we feed in $PM, which is the current member ID that we're looping through. And then we want to specifically grab the model. Okay, so that means that PM to add, in fact, let's rename that to make that more PM model. That's more accurate to what it is. So that now means that the model has been stored in that variable. Okay, the next thing we need to grab is which tile are they going to be spawned onto. Now remember, we're using those 3 that are in a group. So we're going to create a local variable called spawn location, or spawn object, or spawn tile. It's more accurate what it is. Spawn tile, and it's going to equal group entry zone. And again, this is why you want to have this same group named the same in all of your maps, so that there will always be a group entry zone that this script can find, because if it's on all maps, then, you know, you don't have to create a different script for all maps. And then you're going to pass in this incrementer. Okay, so what that means is it's now going to grab a specific tile. So this is going to start at 0, because group is an array. And if you know anything about arrays, they go from 0 to however many things there are in an array. So if there's 3 tiles in our array, then it goes from 0 to 2. 0, 1, 2. That's 3, right? So it starts at 0. So the first one it's going to grab is the first tile. So it's going to grab tile number 1 and put it into this variable. Now, the tricky bit is that the add character command doesn't accept a tile object as a parameter. It actually needs a coordinate. So separately to that, what we then need is the spawn tile coordinates, which I'll just call STC. And for that, you then need to pass in the object that we've grabbed, so the spawn tile, and then .coord, and that will store its coordinates into this variable. Unfortunately, you can't do it all in one go. You can't say group entry zone inc.coord. It doesn't like that. So you have to do it as two separate requests. But now we've grabbed the coordinate, now we can finally add our party member onto the map. So to do that, we first of all want to store, oh no, we're gonna use entity ID. So we're going to do add character. No, we're not. No, we're not going to do that. Sorry. We're going to do current party member equals add character, and then we're passing in the model, so that's PM model, that's the person to add, and then we're going to type tile, open and close square brackets, and then this is where we're going to feed in STC, but we have to do it for all coordinates, so stc.x, stc.y, stc.z, okay, semicolon, and that will store the person who's added into this variable. So we can now use that variable to add them to a group. So current PM, and then followers, and then the current added party member should have their behavior set to follow, so that each one follows us like they should be between maps. And then the final thing is the local variable goes up by 1. So then it goes to the next tile for the next person. So basically what this script is doing is it's assigning each party member a tile out of those groups, which is why it's just so much easier if you do it that way. Then you don't have to worry if a tile is vacant or mathematically having to go up in coordinates. Just put the tiles that you want your party members to spawn around you into a group, and as long as there's the maximum amount of tiles for the amount of people you're going to have in your party, then everybody gets a tile, basically. And what this script does is it basically assigns each party member a tile as it goes through, okay? And then what it does is once it's added them, it adds them to a group so that when we leave the map, it can remove them as well. Okay, so this is the important bit to keep it so that we can add and remove as you leave maps. Okay, apply and save, and then this script goes on all the maps that you should be entering with your party, with one exception, and I'm going to show you that in a second. Let's just wait for this to save. Okay, so here we have the overworld map. So we're going to put preload script, set that to place party. Save, go to map 2, preload script, place party, save. Okay, now let's check it because that should work. Now I should also say, let's also do map 3 as well. So here's this map. Let's get rid of this scripts and set preload script to place party, save. Now we don't want to put that on map 3, but I'm putting it on map 3 to show you why. Okay, but let's go into game. Okay, so now I've got 3 party members following me. So as soon as I leave this map, they should despawn and then appear around me and follow me. So we can now walk around this map, and if I go back, they should despawn from here, spawn back into this map. Yeah, so I've now created a mechanic where my party members can follow me around as I walk around my game world. Okay, they will follow me between maps and they'll be added in as I walk between maps. Okay, however, let's start battle, and I called it battle, and this uses map 3 as a battle map. So let's see what happens. Now ignore, oh yes, in order for it to work, sorry, I would need to actually, I duplicated this map at a point in time where I hadn't set the groups up. So let me just quickly do that. So ignore this error, as what I was trying to say earlier. Ignore this one because that's got nothing to do with our system. That's got some issue with the purple slime asset. I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, here we are now in a battle map. And if I rotate the map, we can see that we've got an interesting scenario here because we've got 2 Justins, 2 Sarahs, 2 Stumpies, me, and a slime. Okay? And the reason for that is, and I sort of mentioned this before in the party members video, the ones with the health bars, so Stumpy, Sarah, and Justin, these are the ones that are in my party. That's these ones, PM1, PM2, PM3, because I've got coordinates now. So this battle map has added my party members on the map. But we've also got these ones here. And that's because this map has the same script on it, which is, place party. And so it's added them at the beginning of the map as well. So we've got our visual representation, our fake party members, but we've also got our real party members. So it's created an instance where we didn't actually want our fake party members to be added to this map because it's a battle map. So that's what I mean when I say the script we wrote that spawns our party members should only be placed on maps that aren't battle maps. Because when you go to a battle, tactical or menu, it's going to place them already. That's when party members actually come into play. So any battle maps that are used for that, you don't reference your fake party members at all in that case. Okay. So we would basically go back to the editor and remove place party from this map. Okay. Obviously that goes without saying that you would want to have unique maps for your battles, because otherwise you might, you don't have to, you'd have to add a check in your code that checks if you're currently in a battle when this is, it just gets a bit more complicated. So there are ways around it, but the simplest way is if you have unique maps for battles compared to ones that are not battles, then you can just simply place this script on all the non-battle maps and they won't get added in alongside your party members when you join a battle. Okay. And again, like I mentioned earlier, when it came to equipping, Sarah didn't have the sword that we equipped Sarah, but if I don't know if Sarah's got an attach point. Let me just have a quick look. Let's show equipment party.member PM2. Give item 0001 1 party.member PM2, give her the sword. I don't know if she's going to show it or not. No, I haven't set up attach points on Sarah. She should be showing the sword. Actually, I don't have a model for it either, so, it wouldn't work anyway. But it's equipped. So if I show Sarah's equipment again, this is the Sarah that's using that sword. But obviously, if I'd set up a model and given her an attach point and things, she would now be holding it. But this Sarah would obviously still not be holding it. So this is what I mean by now you would actually see the equipment that you've actually equipped. This is where you would see it. You wouldn't see it on the ones you add unless you script that to be done separately. Okay. Which we talked about earlier when I discussed that. But I just wanted to reiterate that on a tactical battle map, this is where you would actually see your party members with that equipment. Okay. So the only last thing to talk about, I know this video has been a bit of a long one. That's just simply virtue of the fact that there's a lot to discuss with NPCs following you because there's so many things you've got to consider. But last thing I'll go over when it comes to party members is how do you dismiss a party member? So we got them following us, but what if we tell Justin, for example, to not be in our party? Not only do we want to remove him from the party codex, but we don't want him following us around because he's not in our party anymore. So how would you go about doing that? I'll just quickly show you one way you could go about doing that. So what we'll do is we'll create a new dialog file. There's other ways you can do this, but this is just the way I'm going to do it, just to give you an idea. I'll call this follow dialog. Okay. And we'll just have the player say, can you wait here, please? And then the NPC, no problem. Okay. And then we'll have a script. So for this script, I'm going to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to change the behavior of the current person who says it to, we're going to change their move area parameter to none. So they don't walk around anymore. We'll leave their player interest as seek player so that we can easily have them follow us again when we change it to move area all, but we'll just change that so they stay in place. But what we also need to do is remove from group. Oops. Let me just add it. I can't remember what parameters it takes. It might just be 1 or it might be 2. Yeah, it's just like add. So the self and then the group name. So we want to remove self from followers. So they're not in that group of followers anymore because they're not following us. And then the last thing to do is remove party member. Now, again, we're going to have to store the model name first. Or are we? No, because it's the member ID, isn't it? So what we need to do is grab, how are we going to do this? Yeah, we need to grab the model. So let's store that. It's a little bit more complicated, but here we go. Model name equals self.model. So grab the model of the character we're talking to at the moment. And then before we remove them, we need to store their party member ID based off of party dot, how are we going to do this? That's a good question. How do you actually get the party member? Here's what we'll do. We're going to have to loop through, unfortunately. For every party member in party, do. It's amazing how you think something's really simple, and then as you start to do it, you realize, oh no, there's actually quite a bit of complexity in this. So we're going to loop through the party, and we're going to store the model of the current party member. So let me just distinguish that. Party member model equals party.member pass in $PM dot model. Okay, so we now got two models. We've got the model name of who we're talking to. Now we're looping through the party codex and grabbing all the models from the party, and then if the PM model is equal to model name, in other words, if it's the same, then that's the person who we're trying to remove. Okay, if that's the case, that's when we remove party member. So then you remove party member PM, because that's the party member ID. Okay, and I think that's all you need to do. And then break, because at that point, you don't want to keep looping through. If it's found them, it's found them, right? So I believe that should work, okay? So we'll test that in a second. Let's just talk about where this needs to go. So this dialogue needs to be available while they're following us. So this dialogue actually needs to go into the behavior follow. So while they're following us, we should be able to interact with them and trigger dialogue 3 or follow dialogue. Okay, so that means all of them, when they're given that behavior, they'll all have this dialogue as well. Okay, let's test. So we've got a party of 3. Let's just quickly test. So we've got a party of 3. Let's ask Justin to stay behind. So can you wait here, please? No problem. Okay. So now he shouldn't be following me, but Sarah and Stumpy still are. And if I print party, we don't have a PM1 anymore. Okay. And if I transition to map, he shouldn't be removed because he's not in the followers group. And he also won't be added because he's not in my party. So only Sarah and Stumpy get added into this map. Okay. And then if we go back, Justin's still where he left him, and Sarah and Stumpy are still following me. And I can talk to Sarah, for example. Can you wait here? And now only Stumpy is following me around. And Stumpy will despawn and then spawn in, despawn, spawn in. But these characters will stay where we left them. And then obviously you would do the reverse to that. You'd now have a dialogue on them for this behavior. At the moment, it's still, the behavior is actually still set to the same behavior. So it's still going to be the same dialogue. So notice if I talk to Justin, it's telling him, can you wait here, please? So what you'd want to do is either change behavior to a new one at that point that's got a different dialogue on it. Or when you run this script, as well as doing that, you're also going to want to do self behavior. Oops. Dialogue or whatever, change it to a different dialogue file. So it's the same behavior, but now it's got a different dialogue for when you want to pick them up again. And obviously the code for that would be sort of the opposite of this. You would grab their model name for who they're talking to. How would you do it in reverse? Let me just have a quick think, because obviously you don't have them in your party anymore, so you can't. How would you get that? What you might want to do, what might make life a lot simpler, is if you have a custom property on all your entities that also have their party member ID. So if I had Justin on the map, okay, just show it on the map editor. If I had this Justin on the map with a custom property called PMID or something like that, and then you put in there PM1 or whatever. Now you wouldn't be able to do it at map. You wouldn't be able to do it now because you don't know what order the player is going to add them in. This could get added in as PM3 if he's the third person you speak to. So you'll need to store this property at the time when you add them, when it gets used to add them to the party. Also store their party member ID into this property, okay, at a later date, okay? But create it now in the editor, but leave it blank. But then write to it in your initial dialogue. So the one that says, want to join me? You would also, once you know this, you would store that into their entity property. And what that would then mean is that when you tell Justin to stay put, if you do, you can then reference what ID he's got in his property and use that for the restore party member request. So then you can add them back to your party and then use their model to add them as a follower, or use self, add them back into the followers group, etc. It's change their behavior, self.behavior, etc. At that point, it's really easy. The only most complicated part is how do you know which party member they are based on their separate party member ID. And I think for that, store it in their custom property for the entity. Okay, so each entity has a reference to what their party member ID as well is. That might even make the script we wrote in this dialogue easier. You know, I didn't think about doing it that way. So if you do it that way, you might find that actually a lot of this complexity can be eliminated. But mess around with it. I leave it to you now to go away and design your party members or followers however you want to do it. But hopefully this video has been useful to you and answered many questions you might have about how followers work. If you have any questions about anything I've gone over in this video or anything I haven't that I've missed, do feel free to ask on the Discord. But for now, that'll wrap up this video. Thanks for sticking through it and watching it all, if you have done. Stay tuned for the next tutorial.